A short time ago, an American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima and destroyed its instruments to the enemy. That bomb has more power than 20,000 tons of TNT. The Japanese began the war from the air at Pearl Harbor. They have been repaid many-fold, and the end is not yet. With this bomb,
On the morning of August 6, 1945, the American Enola Gay plane threw in the middle of Hiroshima, 580 meters from the surface, a metal object 3 meters long containing 64 kilograms of uranium. This object was called the Little Boy bomb, but my friend, in fact, as you know today, it was not a little boy at all. This was the first atomic bomb in history. The moment it explodes, life will change completely in the seventh largest city in Japan, which will be a part of hell. And one of the biggest tragedies in history will begin, which will be known as the Hiroshima tragedy. That morning, a large number of Hiroshima residents were in the streets, going to work or school, participating in expanding roads in preparation for a possible American invasion. Some of them noticed the plane, Enola Gay, which was a B-29. Some of them saw it in the sky. The plane was walking and strutting in the sky of the city. The truth is, no one cared that much. They thought a plane like any other plane? Very few people could understand that this is an American plane. Also, the raid sirens did not go off. Even if it was a raid, it would never be a single pilot. Usually a huge squadron of planes bombing the city, not one plane, and they bomb with hundreds of bombs. We'd see rain of gunpowder. Also, Hiroshima, unlike other cities in Japan, had never experienced raids before. In a way, many of the city's residents were convinced that it would remain safe. It is impossible for the Americans to ever bomb Hiroshima. This is because a large number of Japanese immigrants to America are originally residents of Hiroshima. That's all besides a famous rumor at the time saying President Truman's aunt lived in Hiroshima. This rumor was very widespread among the people. Thus, no one was interested in this plane. At exactly 8:15, my friend, the bomb is dropped. Specifically on a hospital called Shima. Suddenly, a dazzling light radiates across the city of Hiroshima, a light like the flash of a million cameras. It was all in the morning as well, as if you were seeing day above day. As described by the survivors who were 8 kilometers away from the explosion point, they said that they felt as if they were looking into the sun. Light, as I saw in Oppenheimer, without any sound, in less than a second. A fireball is formed with a diameter of up to 250 meters. Its temperature ranges from 3,000 to 4,000 degrees Celsius, a ball that devours all the air around it. Its flames burn everyone within 3,000 meters. This ball, my friend, killed 70,000 people in one moment. Most of them died without understanding what was happening and realizing its last moment of his life. Some of them evaporated from the surface of the earth, and nothing remained in their place except their shadow. In a phenomenon known as nuclear shadows, Shima Hospital, where the nuclear bomb fell, disappeared with those who were in it. Nothing remained from them at all. The next moment, a terrible explosion wave erupts. Every building's glass in the city within a 2-kilometer radius was destroyed. Let me tell you, the glass of houses 16 kilometers away from the bomb was destroyed. People felt the bomb from 60 kilometers away. In an instant, the city's residents who were left alive found themselves in the middle of a storm of flying building blocks. Blocks that are on fire and taking out everything in front of them. Some estimates say that these inflamed lumps caused 30% of the deaths and injuries. Then suddenly the wave ends, and calm prevails over the city of Hiroshima. But it is not the calm of the end. Rather, it is the calm of the beginning of the tragedy. The first thing the residents of Hiroshima face after the bomb is fire. The fireball caused a huge fire that reached every place in Hiroshima. The fire that doubled its spread and strength, the blow of strong wind over the city, spreading fire everywhere. And at the moment when Hiroshima was burning, thousands were emerging from under the rubble, trying to understand what was happening. Tens of thousands of people rising from the rubble, like zombies. They go out walking in the middle of a whole city that is burning. Most of them have terrible burns, of course. None of them understood anything. Many of them were difficult to recognize their features. After the fire burned much of their faces, they all have one goal in mind: to reach any of the city's rivers quickly because of the immense heat they felt, to ease a little the flames of their burning bodies. When they reach the river, they see an unpleasant surprise. The rivers also turned into fire because of the blocks of wood that flew from the burned houses, the houses that were on the banks of rivers. About half an hour later, rain falls on the city of Hiroshima. This may be the strangest water that has ever descended on human beings in history. Dark black rain saturated with ash, smoke, and radiation particles in the atmosphere. Radioactive rain. Some people who got this rain on their skin got burns and injuries. With the increase in fires everywhere and the absence of anyone who can extinguish them, the residents of Hiroshima begin trying to get out of the city, and they go towards the hills beyond its borders. A procession of people forms, with only one expression on their faces, which was shock. Walking almost naked after their clothes were burned. No one was shy, because no one had anything like this in their brain at all. Secondly, because the appearance of the skin was not of a normal color, the skin that was visible from under the clothes was falling off and bleeding. Tens of thousands of people instinctively raised their hands up to avoid friction between wounds. Tens of thousands walking among corpses everywhere, raising their hands as if they are surrendering to an enemy they do not see. Large groups of people have lost their sight. They were looking for someone to help them and guide them to the exit. Even those who saw did not know where. People running and calling for water, they want to drink and extinguish the flames on their bodies. The journey that many people weren't able to complete and will fall in the way due to fatigue and surrender to their fate and die. While Hiroshima was suffering, no one in the capital, Tokyo, understood exactly what was happening. Suddenly, phone communications with Hiroshima were completely cut off. The radio line is not available, and the telegraphs are not working. Railway signals are off, and military communications are cut off. An army unit in a nearby city was assigned to send someone to Hiroshima to see what happened there. At 1 o'clock noon, a telegraph arrives saying just one sentence: Hiroshima was completely wiped out with one bomb, and fires are everywhere. Of course, my friend, the officials didn't understand. How can one bomb wipe out an entire city? There is no such thing in the world. When the 6 o'clock news broadcast on Japanese radio, it only said a little piece of news that some flammable bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and we're calculating the damages. We cannot imagine that one bomb can do all this. And 1 a.m. Tokyo time, 17 hours after the bomb was dropped, U.S. President Harry Truman comes out delivering his speech in which he will announce to the world the dropping of the first atomic bomb on the city of Hiroshima, and actually explaining to the Japanese what happened. Why is it possible for a single bomb to cause such destruction? But despite all this, after a commission from Tokyo arrived in Hiroshima, it arrived the next day to assess the damage and see the city. There is nothing but a pile of ashes. There was, my friend, very clear confusion and denial of the Japanese leadership. Some leaders were talking about steadfastness and continuing the fight. This state of denial, my friend, unfortunately does not last, because it takes another slap that is very severe from reality. A new disaster will strike Japan within just 72 hours. When the second bomb falls on the city of Nagasaki and the tragedy is repeated, for the next day, the Japanese government would clearly announce, free from confusion and hesitation, its surrender. One of the hospitals that survived the bombing and was not subjected to major damage was the Transportation Authority Hospital. One of its doctors was Dr. Michihiko Hachiya, who was interested in monitoring what was happening and writing it in his diary. After that, it will be a very important reference to know what happened to the people in Hiroshima. What makes, my friend, these remarks so important is that between 300 doctors, which is the number of doctors in all of Hiroshima, only 28 doctors from them survived. One of them was this doctor who provided in his diary an accurate description and important observation of events. How, for example, did the first traces of radiation appear? The first trace of radiation appeared when suddenly the infected people relieved themselves dozens of times per night. Unfortunately, some of the patients needed to go to the bathroom more than 50 or 60 times. Their feces were all blood, and no one understood why it was happening. The initial belief was that this was often dysentery, and doctors began isolating everyone who showed these symptoms. As the second day passed, stranger symptoms began to appear. People started coming to the hospital with strange blisters on their skin, and they had bleeding gums. The strange thing is that these people survived the bombing. Their burns were minor, if they were injured at all. These people are supposed to be okay, but over time, symptoms began to develop. Their temperature began to increase. They experienced severe fatigue and vomit blood. Within a day or two, they died. The doctors, my friend, did not understand these people were supposed to have survived the bombing. What happened to them to die like this? After 4 or 5 days, new symptoms began to appear. Purple spots on the skin that do not hurt, but it is itchy. Their skin eats them to scratch it. This was a very important sign because anyone who had these spots died after 2 or 3 days. Hiroshima has become a city of terrified people, a city where people take off their clothes every now and then. They are looking to see if there are stains or not. If the answer is there are no spots, this means that his life extended at least a new day. A new day of life, but it is also a new day of anxiety if these spots would appear on his body later. A new day in a life with a completely unknown fate. But if the answer is yes, there are spots on your back, this means certain death. All that, my friend, the doctors are at a loss because they have never seen symptoms like this before. While the whole world is talking about the atomic bomb, no one in Hiroshima knows that people are talking about it, and that they became the talk of the world and the world's first victims of the atomic bomb. Dr. Hachia records that the first time he knew that what was thrown at them is called an atomic bomb was a week after the bombing when one of the doctors came to help from a nearby city and commented saying that the atomic bomb was a very terrible thing. Here the rumor is confirmed that America used this terrible weapon on the city of Hiroshima to make life in this city before the bomb a chapter, and what's after another chapter entirely. Not only in Hiroshima, in the whole world, the new chapter will witness Hiroshima become a city uninhabitable for decades. On August 15, 1945, for the first time in their history, the Japanese heard the voice of the Japanese emperor while delivering a surrender speech. When some residents of Hiroshima heard the speech, through the few radios that managed to pick up the signal, many of the people of Hiroshima were crying bitterly, not because Japan lost, nor because Japan surrendered, but because if this surrender letter was only 9 days earlier, none of this would have happened. It could have saved their fate, which is not only terrifying, but also unknown and incomprehensible. Until now, we don't know where these diseases and symptoms will end. The issue is not just a tragedy and the loss of family, loved ones, housing, and home. This is a future where every sentence ends in a question mark. We don't know what will happen to us in the coming days. Will we wake up alive or dead? Question marks were not only from the people of Hiroshima, but it was also from those who threw the bomb at them. Let me tell you that until the time Hiroshima and Nagasaki were bombed, no one knew exactly the effects of exposure to this huge amount of radiation. Humans in the environment after being exposed to this amount of radiation, how would they look like? And what effect it had, not only at the moment of the explosion, but in the days, months, and years that follow. This knowledge absent from the world, we will begin to know it little by little. The people of Hiroshima will begin to know it before anyone else with every new symptom that appears on those infected. For example, you have purple spots that mean death. During autopsies, they discover that it is a symptom of internal bleeding that happens to organs whose cells are destroyed by radiation. After a week, a new symptom begins to appear. People start losing hair on their heads. Hair falls out for no apparent reason, and after a very few days, these people also die. Once again, panic reigns in Hiroshima. Every time a symptom appears, it leads to death. People start to pull their hair and their kids' hair to check whether their hair is falling out or not. On September 3, 1945, the Japanese professor, Dr. Masao Suzuki, arrived at Hiroshima. This doctor was experimenting on rabbits by exposing them to radiation. He had important studies in the field of radiation. Hiroshima thought that they could find a solution for these people on the hands of this distinguished professor who has done a lot of research related to exposure to radiation, and could easily prescribe treatment for them and stop this cruel wheel of death. But my friend, he shocked them. He said, there is nothing we can do for the injured except provide them with rest and good food. The idea, my friend, is that even rest and eating well were very difficult in Hiroshima. What comfort in a country where most of the population has died? What fresh food in a city that is one step away from famine? This simply means surrender to death. In short, my friend, the only person in Japan who could have had a solution to this problem said that there was no solution. When the first foreign aid arrived to the stricken city through the Red Cross mission, they said the situation was very difficult and demanded the largest amount of medical supplies as quickly as possible. Journalists from the Allies countries began arriving to the city and witnessed daily deaths and the strange effects of the bomb. European and American newspapers published that something strange is happening in Hiroshima. There is something mysterious that the media calls the atomic bomb plague. When the Americans felt global pressure, their generals began to reassure the people. Okay, the bomb is done with its effect, and no one will die from it again. This is the news the world was waiting to hear. But of course, my friend, unfortunately, this does not happen. With Japanese newspapers publishing the tragic news coming from Hiroshima, General Douglas MacArthur, American military governor of Japan, who was present after Japan's surrender and its occupation by America, he warned Japanese newspapers against hot headlines in the misuse of the Hiroshima crisis. What added salt to the wound? That on September 19, 1945, Japanese newspapers were censored and were prohibited to publish any information about the atomic bomb. But when John Hersey, a New Yorker journalist, visits Hiroshima and writes an article of 31,000 words, it was published in an entire issue of the magazine in August 1946, being the strange irony that when the Americans see the article in their newspapers, they got to know the details of the Hiroshima tragedy, while the Japanese, who were hit by the bomb, didn't know these details. Most Japanese people didn't know what happened in Hiroshima because their newspapers in Japan were forbidden from publishing about it. There was a complete media blockade there. For example, you have the Japanese director Akira Iwasaki. This director, my dear, visited Hiroshima and recorded footage of the devastation that occurred there and the deplorable humanitarian situation. But unfortunately, these tapes were confiscated and went to the American military archives. They were classified there as top secret and didn't come to light until many years later. Also, the research unit at the Riken Institute in Tokyo that was studying the effects of nuclear radiation faced orders to dismantle it and destroy its factories under the pretext of preventing Japan from arming itself in the future. But of course, my friend, the Americans' greatest concern at that time simply, pragmatically, and clearly was not to distort America's great victory and not to distort the amazing invention that brought absolute power to them, the power with which they will rule the world. In April 1947, Shinzo Hamai is elected mayor of Hiroshima. This man had strong plans not only to remove Hiroshima from its unfortunate reality, but also to transform it into a global symbol. The mayor of Hiroshima had a vision that what happened in the city was bigger than just being specific to it. This is an event that the whole world needs to hear about and learn from. Also, recovering Hiroshima from its destruction was not only important for its residents, but important for the whole world to realize the horror and ugliness of the atomic bomb, and no one uses it again. In 1949, the city's mayor wrote a message of peace from the people of Hiroshima to the whole world. The letter was signed by 110,000 Hibakusha, the indigenous people who attended the bomb explosion. This message was carried by the American journalist Norman Cousin, who delivered it to the Secretary General of the United Nations. The message said the people of Hiroshima don't want anything from the world other than them being a symbol of peace, and for humanity to know what happened to them to make sure that this never happens again. At the same time, the Japanese parliament passed a law declaring the city of Hiroshima a symbol of world peace. He begins to transform the center on an area of 120,000 square meters. One of its most important landmarks is the Peace Dome. The dome was an industrial exhibition building, which was made of concrete. At the moment of the bombing, its location was exactly under the center of the bomb. This dome miraculously escaped destruction, And this dome remained standing alone like a sad, speechless witness that attended everything from beginning to end. A witness standing in the middle of a city that has become ruins. Today, UNESCO considers the dome one of the World Heritage Symbols. In the middle of the park, we see the memorial to the victims of the nuclear bomb. Inside, it contains the names of all known victims of the bomb. On this monument is written, "Let all the souls here rest in peace, for we shall not repeat the evil." Over time, Hiroshima has not only turned into a city calling for peace and now reminds the world of the danger of nuclear weapons. Rather, it has launched huge initiatives to spread the culture of peace around the world. It launches initiatives to confront problems such as poverty and illiteracy. These initiatives are so large that the Baptists for Peace initiative had more than 8,200 cities participate in it, in more than 166 countries around the world. Even today, millions of people visit Hiroshima every year to see how it transformed from a completely destroyed city to a city where every corner has a garden and all its streets carry one word: peace. My friend, this only leaves us with the question if the world will learn from this harsh lesson of this long and painful suffering. Maybe the world was lucky that for 78 years, and despite all the enormous conflicts, this destructive weapon wasn't used again. But my friend, although this weapon hadn't been used, but its production did not stop. The state of greed to produce more of this weapon has not yet ended. According to the UN, the world today contains more than 22,000 atomic bombs. So we wonder if the owners of these bombs will one day come and use them. Or did Hiroshima and Nagasaki carve an eternal lesson in history? In the end, if you like this episode, do not forget to appreciate our efforts and see you next time.